this book I'm bringing today, I usually don't bring books like this because they are very, very, very controversial. And because I'm not a scholar, let me start there. Anybody who's listening, I am not a scholar in Islamic anything. So I just want that to be known. So I already let you know we going into the realm of Islam. So without further ado, my book is called Mountains of Knowledge. Mountains of Knowledge, y'all. This book, it came out in 9 and 8. What was it? 98. I got it in 2000. And we always tell you how loved our books are. I just want to point out something. We use everything for bookmarks when we don't have bookmarks, but you can get your unread bookmarks with me if you want one. But I guess when I was using this, I was at North Beth Israel Hospital. And the date was July 24th, 2001.
Wow.
2001, North Beth Israel. I was there, security pass I was sitting there, and I had this book with me. I take a book with me everywhere I go. But let's talk about this book, Mountains of Knowledge, and what made me bring it today. So just recently, there's been a young man online talking about the Bible, and he discusses the Bible in a pretty unique way, his own way, which I really love because I'm one of those people who love to speak in first person a lot of times when we talk about the Bible and talk about it as in present day and related to present day things and use present day language in place of things. And everybody doesn't appreciate that type of commentary, but I happen to, because I feel like much with things like Shakespeare and other stuff that was written in a very different time when people spoke differently, that something is sometimes lost in translation when trying to talk to some of the young people about these same subjects. It sounds foreign to them, but when you put it in a language they understand, it makes a lot more sense. So in Islam, there's very strict rules when it comes to certain things. And in the sharing of knowledge, the passing on of knowledge is either widely accepted or not. And it depends on the school of thought or not. So I brought some notes with me today, and I don't usually try to bring this many notes, but it's important to be able to share this book. So the Mountains of Knowledge are the inheritors of the prophets. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. These 12 inheritors of the prophets, these 12 imams that they mention in this book, have given their commentary and their creed and their thoughts on different things. And one thing I'd like to point out is that we have to understand what a creed is. And we have our English teacher there who can explain for us what a creed is. But the creed is your way, your path, your thoughts, your understanding of a particular thing and how you carry it out, correct? So in that, they have the creed of each one of these imams. So like I said, they have 12 here listed, but they also go into bibliographies of the scholars in chapter 11 to tell a little bit more about their lives. And in the appendix, they talk about the creed and methodology and biography of Imam Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari, which is one of the scholars that is renowned. So let me just say, anybody that made it into this book is one of the scholars that either was widely accepted or widely rejected. And I say that in the way of, as I was putting together my notes about what parts I wanted to highlight, because again, I'm not a scholar, and some of this information I realized as I wanted to share it, you would need some background information on to understand why something is important or not. So let's just get started with the book. Like I said, it was published in July 1998, which is the Islamic year of Rabi Awal, 1419. And it was published by Salafi Publications in the UK. Okay. And just for the record, I am not going to be sharing a lot of my Arabic, even though I realize that it is said that Allah rewards you for every stumbled word. We will be sitting here stumbling all day because my Arabic is all right, but under pressure, I fold a little bit. I'm not going to front. It's just like reading in front of the class for the first time. Read Arabic in front of the class. Yeah, try that. But the publishers open with the forward and important advice. And they say, all praise is due to Allah. We praise him and we seek his aid and forgiveness. We seek refuge in Allah from the evils of our own souls and the evil of our actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, there is none who can misguide him. And whomsoever Allah misguides, there is none to guide. I bear witness that there is none that has the right to be worshipped other than Allah, alone, without any partners, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his servant and messenger. It goes on to say, with the aim of actualizing the saying of the Reverend Imam Malik ibn Anas, the affairs or latter part of the Ummah will not be corrected except by that which is corrected in the first part. This presentation of the creed and the methodology of the early generations, known as the Salaf Saleh, is preserved in some of the manuscripts and documents which have been verified by both the past and contemporary scholars of the Sunnah, as it will not be hidden from any and every Muslim, the earlier ones who go back in history, and the purer and cleaner the religion gets, until we reach the era of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may Allah be pleased with them all, to whom they gave advice. And it says, it gives the hadith, it gives the message here from the hadith that says, I have left you upon clear proof. It's night like it's day. No one deviates from it except that he is destroyed. And whoever amongst you lives for long will see the great controversy. So stick to that which you know from my sunnah and the sunnah of the orthodox, rightly guided caliphs. Cling to that with your molar teeth. And for this reason, we will find some of the tests be advising those in their time and after them to stick to the original state of affairs. I'll stop there and give a little bit of Jamila here. So I remember when I first really began to practice Islam and study Islam on a deeper level, not on the surface level. And once you do that, you do need to read more. Not necessarily read more, but if you want a broader understanding of what it is you're seeing or why it is the way it is, you need to ask yourself questions like, how did it get this way? What is it? Etc., etc. So I want to refer to my notes, and it says there is no single surah in the Quran that lists or details the many internal sects of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam by name. However, the Quran mentions the division of religious communities into factions and sects in chapters like Surah Al-Arum and Surah Al-Nam. And it says in Surah Al-Rum, it says, warned against being of those who split up their religion and become sects, each sect rejoicing in that which it is in. Surah Al-Anam states, indeed, those who divide their religion and become sects, you are not associated with them in anything. And in Surah Tubayina, notes that the people of the scripture, the Al-Kitab, and then it goes on to say that referring to Jews and Christians only divided in their factions after clear proof had came to them. So a lot of what the scholars discuss here is what was initially revealed to or by the prophet or his companions, and then after his ascension, the imams that took over um and the creeds that they and the laws and things that they uphold and things that they held, that they changed. Now for those who study Islam or know a little bit about Islam, there you are not supposed to change anything in Islam from the Quran. They say, to change anything is an innovation and is a bid'ah, and every bid'ah is in the fire. So when you change things, basically you are creating the fire for yourself. So they each one that they mention in here covers um a different they talk about their creed from a different perspective, but I wanted to mention the unity and division. Okay. Because one of the things I found most interesting when I accepted Islam was when I began to learn about the Judaics, the religion, and the Christian religion in terms of this separation that they were talking about. And so in a well-known narration in Sunan Ibn Majah, the Prophet Muhammad states that the Jews will split into 71 sects, the Christians into 72 sects, and that the Muslim community was split into 73. Now this may or may not mean anything to anyone, but if you understand the command from the Quran in Surah 3, it tells us that the Quran orders the believers to hold fast to divine guidance collectively and forbid internal schisms, and to hold firmly to the rope of Allah all together and do not become divided. So that was a law. That was a not just a suggestion. It was in the Quran. It was basically letting you know that, listen, when we have internal stuff, when we fussing over little stuff, this is how things separate. And it wasn't until I saw that in my own community. Again, I was in New Jersey, part of, I guess, the biggest Islamic community there in northern New Jersey. And I was there when they started small, when we were still in our small building before we moved into a big building. And then I remember the whispers and the things going on, talking about how, there was a group of people that was going to break off and go start their own masjid. And at the time, I was like, okay, that we're going to have another masjid. That's great. Someplace else to go. But when I understood that they were dividing because they couldn't agree on certain things, it really made me start to take books like this and look at it and understand what had already happened and what is still happening now. Because in the beginning, I didn't know that there were more types of Muslims. I thought it was just a Muslim. You're just a Muslim and that's it. Now, did I notice the difference between the people of the Sunnah and the Nation of Islam? Absolutely. Because growing up with both of them around me, I saw the differences. You know what I mean? But if you were to say to me, that there was 73 sects of Islam, I would have never believed you. You know, I would have never believed it, because I'm saying to myself, like, what could we be fussing about that would be so different? And I remember in the year 2000, when I started to study comparative religion, which at the time I didn't have a name for. I just knew I wanted to go out and try to understand what the people was beefing about. Like, what was these big differences that was causing these schisms inside of our faith. And so, of course, looking at history, you look at Judaism and you look at Christianity, because they have 72, 71 and 72 sects of Islam, I mean, of Christianity and Judaism. And I knew people who were Catholics, I knew people who were Baptists, Methodists, all these different things, but I didn't even begin to think that applied to Islam too. So it was important that I found books like this. And so let's just jump in here. Which one did I want to start with? I wanted to start with one that took us right to here. Right to here. Okay. All right, so this one. So there's a sect of Islam that believes that if Allah is the creator and everything was with Allah, that the Quran itself had always been. Are you getting that? So if you are Allah and the word is yours and the world is yours and everything is yours, the Quran always been yours. So they come from this place of uncreatedness. So they saying that the Quran was not created, that it always had been. And then there's a group that says, no, Allah was, but then he created the Quran, and it was divinely revealed through the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So of course, then that takes them into the argument about predestination, free will, and all these different things. Because again, if it was already, how could we be making choices and the outcome is already known? Now, if you sit back and you listen to that, it's a logical question. It's like, well, you know, it's like, okay, was the Quran always? But when we ask ourselves, what is the Quran really? What is the Quran really? What was the Quran before it was named the Quran? These 1,400 years ago, 1,500 years ago, what was it? Because it's always been. If there's always been a world, there's always been a God. There's always been a God who created the world, and there's always been a way that the world is organized and ordered. So that's a big difference between some of the factions, and they stand on it pretty hard. And like I said, these topics are so controversial that I don't feel qualified enough almost to really try to deeply explain that how important it is to know about all of this. Like, I really didn't understand it at first, because there's a where is it here? I actually have it highlighted here. It says an Arabic Quran without any crookedness therein, and it says not created, and then it goes on to say, what does this dawah mean? Bishop Marashi says Muhammad Abu Umran said that the Quran is created, so he replied he has lied. Almighty and Majestic said, surely his is the creation, Al-Khaliq, and the creation, Amr, and the Iman consists of speech. The Iman consists of speech, action, and intention, which increases and decreases. It increases with acts of obedience and decreases with acts of disobedience. And no speech is accepted with action, and no speech is accepted without action and intention. So it talks about this group of people also who will always foremost be on the truth. And I remember thinking about that when it was first said to me, and the first thing and only thing I thought was, well, that have to be the people of the Salaf Saleh, because that's what they said, the people of the Sunnah. You know, the people who follow the Sunnah and the Hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And what I found was that was not the belief all the way across the board. And even so, even more, later on, it came to be said that this group of people who is always foremost on the truth won't only include quote unquote Muslims, it will include believers, because anyone that understands Islam knows that one of our pillars is to believe in all of the books, which means the Psalms, it means, you know, the Injil, which is the Bible, you know what I'm saying, all of these different books. So because all of these books are accepted and need and have to be believed in order to fulfill that pillar of the deen, one would logically say, when it talks about there will be believers from every group, that's exactly what they mean. Let me see the okay. Okay. Important. Metaphor versus literal number. This is where I thought it would get interesting for you, Nick, is we know in numerology, letters have numbers and weight. In Hebrew, they have numbers have letters and weight. And in Arabic, words have letters and weight. And so when I was thinking about this, I was saying to myself, Judaism, when you pray in your language, your holy hot tongue, your fire tongue, right? When you pray in Arabic, when you pray in Islam, you pray in Arabic. Only in Christianity, for the most part, do you pray in English. You have some that pray in Latin or what have you, but very, very, very few. And we know that the English language is the weakest language, is the most bastardized language. So when trying to understand why it's important to recite the Quran in Arabic in its original pen, in the Torah in its original pen of Hebrew, it makes sense because it has more weight, because the words mean something completely different. And anyone that's ever tried to break down words from Arabic or Hebrew and look at the English, they will find it can be a big thing in translation. So when you have books like this, you have people who are, one, they were living in a different time, closer to the time of when some of the stuff was revealed. But more than that, they are giving you their interpretation of a thing, you know, and their thoughts on it. So I wanted to say that before I went on to say the classical scholarship on the 73 sex tradition. They have metaphor versus literal number. So all classic authorities like Al-Sha'abi noted that the number 73 can be a linguistic metaphor in Arabic denoting a vast multiplicity rather than a rigid mathematical count, right? The foundations versus branches, commentators like Al-Katurbi explain that the warning against splitting applies strictly to the core theological foundations, which is called Miller, not to the minor legal variations or different juristic schools of thought, the madhabs, the ideology of the madhabs. And then nature of the deviation. Classical thinkers argued that the groups described as going astray, the 72, typically involve severe theological innovations, bid'ah, that alter the foundation, that offered that excuse me, that alter the foundational things of the day. And last but not least, the nature of it says that alter the foundation of the tenets, but the mainstream Sunni and other traditional scholars do not automatically characterize every erring Muslim outside the broad fold of faith. And so I found that making me sit up at about 3 o'clock going through going through the Quran and going through some hadith. Going through the Quran and going through some hadith, and more than anything else going through here, because you know, you find that the things that seem to separate these sects are so small in the scope of things. You know, it's like yo, and I'm just saying it like this, yo, we all want to get to heaven. Like, what's the beef? You know what I mean? Like why we just can't agree, you know, or whatever. But I realized a lot of it is culture, because when you look at us as the quote unquote Black Muslims or African Muslims or African American Muslims, our situation is the way we live our deen is so close to the Salaf Salih, but we still are who we are. We still have a culture, and if I had to be so bold as to say why it looks so different for us, it is because we were stripped of everything. And so we had to make a decision on what made most sense to us and follow that. And you know, I can say I know Muslims that's on the Sunnah. I know Muslims that follow Sufism. I know a couple of, you know, other, you know, the Ansars are even mentioned in here. You understand what I'm saying? So we have to remember there were the Ansars before there were the Ansars in New York. They were a whole people, you know. And it says here, it says Allah will keep firm those who believe with the word, and that stands firm in this world, and they will keep worshiping Allah alone and nothing else, and in the hereafter. You know, I told you that I spoke about that young man in the beginning who I saw recently, who gives his commentary, you know, on the Bible through his own perspective and how he understands it and how he's able to break it down and explain it. And I found that I'm not going to say only in Christianity, But of the three major religions, that is one of the only places you get to do that. You know, unless you're with a group of people who you know, or a sect that is more philosophical and looking into the different aspects of. And you know, I remember somebody telling me, not just as in Christianity, but even in Islam, you just got to believe, you just got to do what they say. And it's like, you know, it leaves you in this place where it's like, so am I not supposed to think for myself? Like, you know, and I can see how these factions were broken into places because of the fact somebody asked a question that somebody felt you shouldn't ask. For example, was the Quran created or not? And I can see that being a major argument. And it is. It's caused a whole group of people to now have their own sect of Islam. And the one thing I like to say, and again, I don't want to really try to sit here and go really deep into this. I will answer some questions for you, and maybe point out a few more things. But I just want to say that if I was to suggest anything to anyone, it's always to remember that, um, as my nana said, we'll all figure it out in the end. We'll know at the end, quote unquote, who was right, who was wrong. But I think more than anything else, it doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong. Your dean should be reflected in your actions. And if your actions are not that bring on peace, that bring on wholeness for yourself and for the people, for you to be better as a person, and respect and revere the world that you're in and all the things, the gifts that you've been given, eyes, ears, you know, mouth, thought, all of these things. If your practice doesn't reflect and revere that, that would be the time I would say for somebody to maybe examine your practice a little bit more and find out why your words don't align with your actions. Because whatever you say you are, and that's my biggest problem with most people, is they will tell you, I'm a Christian, and then do something that is so horrific. You just be like, wow. And the same thing for the Muslims, and the same thing for the Jewish people. I will say that I've seen it, I've heard it, and I've called people on it. Don't tell me what you are, show me what you are. And I think that in Mountains of Knowledge, we are able to see, like the brother said in the forward, that if we go, the further we go back closer to the actual time of the revelation of the Quran and the Hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we'll see something purer than what we see now. But we also have to remember it was a different time, a different people, a different geography, and that is something that should be taken into account before we call somebody a deviant, or we call somebody off the path, etc. Because at the end of the day, you can say it out your mouth, but um, like my nana said, we'll all figure it out in the end. You'll know if what you were doing was right and exact for you, because what's right for you may not be right for someone else. And that was supposed to be, and let me just say that, because the book of the prophet, I have a book on just the prophet. It's called Arakik Ak Maktoum, and this book is the story of the prophet, and it's talking about him being the sealed nectar, the seal of the prophets, and that anything that came after that would, you know what I'm saying, be subject to bid'ah and innovation and off of the path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects us to be on. So that is my book, Mountains of Knowledge. It is so much more that I can share from you. Like I said, it's a bunch of quotes I can share with you from here. But right now, I just like to hear your thoughts, and if there's any questions from the audience, I'd love to hear what they have as well.
Yes. Very, very interesting work there, and shout out to the audience, the people that come in and out, of course, we saw Knowledge Born Allah early on. Numeralytics also popped into the room. Not sure if she's still here, but, shout outs to Numeralytics, Queen B. We have our episode, our feature on cultural reflections dropping this Wednesday, August 26th. We on BTV, so look out for that. 8 p.m. Eastern time. So shout out to Numeralytics and shout out to BTV Universe out there. But yeah, this is very interesting work. I mean, we don't have any questions from the audience, but one thing that I thought was really interesting that you mentioned at the beginning, as you were describing that this book is a collection of the creeds from various Islamic scholars, but the statement that really stood out to me is that you said these were, correct me if I'm wrong, but these were creeds from both the selected and the rejected. So what information do you have on who edited this work and why they would allowed to have such a wide range of creeds from both ends of the spectrum, the rejected and the accepted together in one work?
That's a great question. And when I say the accepted and the rejected, what I mean is specifically accepted by the Salaf Salih, the people of the Sunnah. Let's see, let me grab an imam here. Okay. I'm trying to see which imam I want to mention here. Okay. Here's one. And this is what, remember I told you it's very controversial, this particular book. Well, not the book, but you figure that this book is bringing some of the most controversial topics into one book. So, it is the belief of the majority of Muslims on the Sunnah that Allah is above, istawa, that's the word, above his throne. Not sitting on it, not leaning on it, just above it, right? And so here, this is the creed of, this one is the creed of, my pages, Abdullah ibn Zubair al-Humaydi, right? And it says, with the verification of Fawaz Ahmad Zumarli. Now, let me just say, anybody that has studied Quran or Hadith knows that your chain of narration is everything. That's what makes something either strong or weak, accepted or not, if your chain of narration is solid. And your chain of narration is solid based on your character and more, you know what I mean? So it's like if Joe down the street told you something and Joe is known for lying, you less apt to believe him when he tell you that, whatever is happening. But if Martha is known to only be a person to speak the truth, even that against her own self is more likely that what she says would be accepted, etc., etc. So same thing with this. It says that a man has faith in a divine predetermination, its good and its evil, its sweetness and its bitterness, and that he knows that whatever befall him is never going to pass him by, and whatever has passed him by will never befall him, and that all of this is ordained by Allah, the mighty and majestic. Now, we know that saying, don't we? But we know it is something else. Whatever's meant for you is meant for you. What's not meant for you is not meant for you. So this is something that is common. We use it every day. This is not, even though this is quote unquote old, this is not an old concept, right? And then it says, here, it says, when I say to you, it's more commentary than anything in these books. This is where the line stop, and this is all commentary. So that's why I say it's more difficult to share this book in the way of being able to just read versus pinpoint a couple that were that stood out. And it says here's one. It says, we have been informed from far more than one person that Imam Malik, which is one of the imams that was popular, right? And had a lot of followers. It says that he said Allah has divided the booty, which is the what you get from after war. He says, and there's also a share in this booty for the poor immigrants who were expelled from their homes and their property. And then he would say, and those who came after them, our Lord, forgive us and our brethren who have preceded us in faith, and put not our hearts in the hatred against those who believed in our Lord. Fully you are true of kindness and mercy. So their thought was that after you fought in their land, you were supposed to split whatever some of the reward was with the people who, who suffered in the process or lost their homes or et cetera, et cetera. But that was not the thought for everyone. You know what I'm saying? That was not the thought for everyone. And that's exactly why, when I say that, why there's accepted and not accepted things here, is because that one belief there will separate a group. And it's something as simple as that. And that's why when I said I realized it was the smallest of things that keep, that separate the groups. This is one of those things. I believe we should give the people some of their money back. I don't believe that we should give some of the people money back. Simple. We argue. I don't want to be with you. You don't want to be with me. All right, you build yours, I build mine. And just that simple, it happens. I'm sure with a lot of fighting and things in between, but nonetheless, that is what ends up happening. And you will have people who would take that side, and you will have people who would take the other. All it takes is what, 2 or 3 gathered. You got a group, and that's what it is. But when I was talking about Allah Istawa above his throne, there are people who believe that Allah sits on his throne. There's people, it's a verse that says he doesn't sleep in slumber. There's people who say he sleeps in slumber. There's people who says he takes a rest. There's people who saying he don't have a mouth or eyes or anything. That was one of the arguments for the lack of creation of the Quran. It says that he didn't have a voice. So how is this voice given? So I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful in any way. And again, this is why I don't bring a lot of purely Islamic books, not being a scholar at all in Islamic studies. But just as a person who reasons, I ask myself sometimes, like, did no one see that these is the most simple things that you having problems with? It's like, and I get it when I've never been around at the forming of a new religion. So, I'm sure you have to be strict in the way of, no, this is the way we're going to do this, or no, this is the way we're going to do that. But again, if we are firm believers in free will and allowing people to make choices, questions should be able to be asked and answered, and to satisfaction. And if it's not to satisfaction, it shouldn't be, well, if you can't get it, you can't be with us. You know what I mean? Maybe it's not meant for that person to get it then. We all know we've all had things that we didn't get at first, and then later on it makes complete sense. So, sometimes I wonder if these separations had more to do with ego and wanting to be in charge than it did actual just, we got beef and we don't believe the same thing. But again, I don't know, and I'm not a scholar, and I'm not in a position to make that call. But what I can say is, from reading the so-called differences, now are there some that's out there? Absolutely, but it is with Judaism and Christianity as well. So it's going to always be something out there. But if we are saying that there's always a people foremost on the word of the Most High, of the Most High God, that would include people from every faith, and those people would be the people who believe the strongest in their faith. And that's, and Allah knows best. Just like there are good quote unquote Muslims, there's others. Same thing with Christianity, same thing with Judaism. And if I was to say who would be that group that's foremost on the truth, well, it would be the best of the Jews, the best of the Christians, the best of the Muslims, the best of the Hindus, the best of the, and the best of the Buddhists, it would be the best of the best. Maybe, or not, who knows? But I know that the harm that is done in the name of these things is one of the hardest things for somebody like me to accept, and I'm sure many others. It was very interesting, and we know it's no such thing as coincidence. Like I said, I was gathering my notes for this book, and sometimes, Nick, I'll put the TV on in the background just for background noise, right? And it happened to be that show Jack Ryan, that Tom Clancy joint, right? And I don't know if anybody has read Tom Clancy's books before, but working in being a bookseller, I've read a lot of books just because they came into the store and we had a bunch of them. But it was the particular season that was on was dealing with Islam and the forming of, or should I say, the downfall of one of the people who had been in charge, one of the caliphs who had been in charge, and a new caliph was establishing himself. And I'm sitting here and I'm watching this, and I'm looking at the book and I'm looking at my notes, and I'm like, this is not a coincidence. So I'm literally watching the small indiscrepancies these people had and how it ended up splitting. Because there's this one scene where the a man that's establishing himself as the new caliphate or whatever, right? He comes to the old caliphate and gives him all his honors, his respect, da da da. And they sitting there talking, and the old caliphate was like, "Well, I'm not giving you permission to do that." And the new guy was like, "I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what I'm gonna do." Right? So he pulls out this bag of money, right? And the Khalifa was like, "Oh, that's for me." And he was like, "Nah." He's like, "It's for your men. I heard your men hadn't been paid and XYZ." And he started walking around, handing each one of the men money. And then they told him, and then he said, he looked at them, and he's like, "Arrest them." And the Caliph was like, "What you mean?" "Oh, they did. They did something as small as and then they were talking about his poor treatment of his men. You know what I'm saying? How he was living high up on the mountain and everybody else barely eating scraps. And this man saw the advantage to be able to come in and say, "Look, I want to take us back." And that was the speech he gave. He was like, "I want to take us back to the ways of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I want to take us back there, not on this deviance that this man is on." And of course, they all went to his side, you know what I mean? And, got rid of the other guy, kicked him out or what have you. But I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about this book, and this is exactly what was happening in that time. This is exactly what was happening. People saw places where the tradition wasn't being upheld as they knew it, and they saw places to exploit that hole, and they came in and they did. And it was just I don't know, it's interesting to me. All of this is, this is one of the reasons I love UnRead, because when I go back through these books, as you saw with my little Beth Israel tat, thing in there, I've been reading this book since 2001 at different times. And when I needed to read about different imams, because Ibn Taymiyyah is the last one that they have down here. Ibn Taymiyyah, a lot of his stuff is highly widely accepted and relied upon in the deen that we all practice today, especially here in the United States. And so yeah, I love our books, and I love that we can go back to them and use them not only as reference books, but when we see programs like that one that was on, and you think about something like this, it really makes sense then, because now you're getting a visual to go with this story. And when you read some of these stories about how easily some of these factions were split, it's amazing. And I like I said, I've seen it in New Jersey many times, in Newark and East Orange. I saw the masjid split, and I won't lie, it blew my mind and broke my heart, because it felt like your family breaking up. You know what I mean? Like, they found something they can't get along about, and it's so and everybody's so firm on their point that nobody's bending. And so I get it though, because if you are trying to practice exactly what it says in the Quran, exactly what it says in the Sunnah, of course you're gonna have issue with somebody who says, "Well, I don't think that's what that means," or "I have a question about that thing." Some people don't take kindly to that. They just feel you should believe and shut up. Just do what he say and shut up. And everybody don't stand on that. For the most part, free thinkers don't. And a lot of times in religion, there's no place for free thinking.
Very
you
true.
know,
True.
is and I hate to say it like that. It's the truth. You're either gonna believe what you say you believe, or all that asking questions. As I was told one time, you're gonna ask yourself, you're gonna ask questions till you just don't believe nothing. That's not true. Not at all. I feel that, examining things and then examining it against yourself and your actions, like I said, I shouldn't have to run around telling people that I believe in God. My actions should show you that I do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? My actions should show you what God I serve.
There you go.
You know what I mean? So that's what I expect from me. And while I expect it from other people, I know it's not something you'll always get. So mountains of knowledge. And this book really does have mountains of knowledge in it. It really does.
Sounds
Definitely.
like, sounds
Because
like.
it goes into it, it goes into studying certain actual verses. It goes into how one group don't believe that the attributes of Allah are proper. They don't think that Allah should have attributes. Because he's not a man, and or he's not. They was like, what do you mean all seeing, all knowing? He's not. And then it's like, but wait a minute, wouldn't that make him all seeing? So it's like, the arguments there sometimes, I think, hit these gray areas, and people look to these scholars for answers when a lot of times, much like everything else, we need to look inside and get some of those answers as well and speak directly to. And that was the thing that Islam was supposed to provide for the people that no other religion did, was that no intercessor was necessary. That's the thing that Islam is supposed to provide for you, where you don't need nobody to ask the questions for you, get the answers for you. You should be able to have your direct connection and relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your creator.
All right then.
That one felt different. I ain't going front.
Yeah, I could tell. I could tell.
Yeah, that one felt.
Yeah. You treated that one quite delicately. Yeah.
Because it's important to me, because I feel like in this time of confusion, people are searching for something. And the ones who at least had some kind of foundation have somewhere to start. But there's a lot of people who don't believe in anything, and it's leaving them in this space where they don't even know what kind of questions to ask. But what I can always tell people is, ask yourself what kind of person you want to be, and what walk of faith lines up with that. And you don't have to give it a label. Let other people do that. Because if I'm not mistaken, when they was running around calling Jesus this and that, he said, well, who do you say I am? Because I'm just old me. I'm doing me. I'm not here to convince you. I'm just here to share. And you take from it what you will. And we know that the Bible uses plenty of metaphors and parables and all of these things. And so what's to make us think that these other books don't as well? And I thought that was very important to mention about that metaphor of the 73, and how it may not mean exactly 73 groups of people. I mean, 73 sects of people, but it may be symbolic for something else. And I said that would be something to explore at some point as well.
Very, very, very interesting work there. Sure.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's my offering, man. I mean, if you don't have many questions, I ain't got nothing else to go with. I can just keep on going from there,
Yeah. No. I think we I think we're good. And that was the question I asked. That was really the main thing. Then another question came up, but you actually answered it as you were going along, because I was also quite curious about the different sects of Islam and how they were represented or not represented in that work. And you mentioned that various sects were mentioned in there. You mentioned the Sunnah as well as the Shia and the Ansar.
And the
So
Sufis,
and the Sufis,
yes, the
yes.
Malikis, you know, and let me just say too, you know, these quote unquote terrorist factions that they have names too, and they have imams that they follow as well. So I mean, that's something to think about as well. You know,
Yeah.
they, like I said, they lump everybody together, not realizing that the ideology is different for many. You know, methodology is different for many. They follow different walks. You know, like I said, your actions reflect what sect you follow.
Yep.
You know, and it you know, and it's almost, I don't mean to be disrespectful in any way, but it's almost like you would wish that Christianity and Judaism did the same thing, because at least you know who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you tell me you a Sunni Muslim, I know what you're dealing with. You tell me you a Shiite, I know what you're dealing with. You know, versus in you say somebody, well, I'm a Methodist, I'm a Pentecostal, I'm a, you know, what, Catholic, and it's like, all right, so what's y'all differences? You know,
Right.
what do y'all stand on that's different? Is it that one prayer is over in 15, 20 minutes and the other one take all day? Is it one speak tongues and the other one don't believe in tongues? I'm like, you should be able to tell me what the difference is, or not tell me, but you should know what the difference is between what you practice and what those other ones practice, because at the end of the day, I look at it like this: all of us are one. We are all connected, right? And whether it's just like with your siblings, you don't always stand on the same thing, but that don't make them not your siblings at the end of the day. Y'all just disagree. You
Yeah.
know, you disagree respectfully and sometimes not. You know, so I just say your way of life should not oppress anyone else's. That's one of the things I look at. Does your belief oppress or not allow space for another person's? Does your walk not reflect in your actions, etc., etc.? And not just in your actions, what about in your character? Unmasking morality, that's coming too. Where do your morals come from? Where do your values come from? Where do your principles come from? And if we saying that these small nuances are things that were big enough to separate whole groups of people, you should be asking yourself, what is it? What values, principles, and things were they standing on that made things so difficult to stand in the same space?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I think we got another one.
Hey, listen, I try to bring them, boy. I try to bring them. Like I said, I try to bring the purely Islamic ones, real gentle, because I'm not an Islamic scholar. I just, for the last 30 years, this is what I have dedicated my life to studying, is not just Islam, but religion in general. Like I said, back then I didn't know to name it comparative religion, but that is exactly what my pursuit became. And I'm really glad, because it's allowed me to not be so rigid. It's
Mhm.
allowed me to be able to at least respectfully hear out my peers,
Yeah.
whether I end up believing what they believe, or agreeing with what they say in any way.
Mhm. Yeah.
you know and I just want to mention too, um when he was talking about the purer and the closer you get to a thing, how you'll see how some of these things are innovations. One of the main things that the new caliphate was saying in that particular speech that he was giving them about taking over, he said that initially in a time of war, no women, no children, no elderly, and no sick or special needs people should ever be harmed. Ever.
Wow.
Ever. And we have seen nothing but that. So we need to ask ourselves, is anyone practicing what they say they're supposed to be?
Yeah. Because that has me wondering, is that something that all of those different various creeds subscribe to, or is it, or
It's not.
Wow.
But if you the closer you get to the origin of, you know, the hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the Quran itself, it'll let you know you're not women, children, elderly, crippled or disabled, and special needs not supposed to be harmed at all. They are not supposed to be involved in fighting. Now, are there stories of great women warriors in every walk of life? Absolutely. From the beginning of time, we've had some great women warriors, you know, but we're talking about attacking, and that's what they're talking about. Like, these people should never be attacked and harmed in the course of trying to get across whatever it is they're doing. So yeah, it's a lot. It can get messy. And so, you know, most people tend not to even talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, not to talk about it, because we know that there's a lot of violence in all these faiths. People have died in the quote unquote name of God since the beginning of time, and it's quite contrary, I'm sure, to what they could and should be practicing.
Okay.
And you know, and Most High knows best.
Okay. All right. Oh, I did think of one more question. I know we getting late, going a little long, but there's one more question that just popped into my head, because you mostly spoke about the, you know, what the book says, and of course you approached it in a very delicate manner, since you are not an Islamic scholar, but just taking it from the scholarship point of view and just going inward and making it more personal. I guess my question is, where would you stand in your personal journey, when it comes to Islam, and do you feel that you fit nicely into any one of these quote unquote labels or creeds or anything of that nature?
Whew, great question. I find that because I'm willing to accept that I don't know everything, and that one, you know, let me just say this one big thing. I am not a master of the Arabic language nor the Hebrew language, but I've been speaking quote unquote English all my life. Right? So I know that a lot of the Quran and the Torah is lost on us because of the translation. So we are always reading somebody else's translation. And it's actually interesting because the first book I was going to bring was a book that had Arabic, English, and the transliterations on how to say pronounce the words, and how important that is to somebody that doesn't speak the language. But to your question, I feel like I embody and practice the most that I can, not the most that I can, but I I am all embracing. Um I'm not saying that to say that um I'm strict on any one thing, because of course if somebody asks me, you say you practice the sunnah, the Quran and the sunnah, but then also outside of that, I understand the Sufis. I understand, for example, this is a perfect example. In with the Salaf Sali or the Sunnah, we thicker. We say the names of Allah, right? We're repeating, Ar-Rahman, 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 right? In the Sufi faith, they do this and they twirl. You got the whirling dervishes, and they got these people that put themselves into an ecstatic state by repeating the same things over and over again. This is the same practice, practiced in different ways. You know what I'm saying? If I wasn't so clumsy, would I whirl? Probably. But I'm very, very clumsy. So all I need to do is close my eyes and I'm whirling. You know what I mean? But you understand what I'm saying? This is a practice that they both do, but they do in different ways. And so if I was to walk into a room and see a Sufi spinning, it wouldn't shock me in any way, like, oh my God, I'm in here with people that worship the devil, like, no. I'm very um and this is sometimes you feel like the things you say in Islam will get you in trouble, but I'm very tolerant. And it says, let me just say, it says that we are supposed to love what Allah loves and hate what Allah hates. And it says Allah loves the truth and hates the bid'ah, the innovation. If any of this stuff is innovation, what's innovation? I don't know. I wasn't there. I know what I read in these books, but I also know that I've been told 999 lies since I've been alive, and I ain't even that old. You know what I mean? So I'm very tolerant, and I'm very patient, and I'm very aware that I don't know everything. I'm very aware that that my thoughts and feelings may change about things as I mature and I learn more. And that would be my advice for anyone to, if you want to just close your eyes and stay where you are and never go too far, just know the same three surahs and know the same, the quotes that everybody else say. If you find with that, that's great. But Islam is a big old thing. The Quran itself is huge. In the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu are deep. And if you begin to study them, there's no way that you could be the same person coming out. And you're going to be the same person after everything you read. And I think that I've been fortunate enough to have some of the best imams of our time as my imams, and while I love them, revere them, respect them, and know that they are giving us the best of what they've learned, I also know that they're human, and that, and nobody knows everything. So I just remind myself I don't know everything, and that there are things that if I'm fortunate, they'll constantly be revealed to me and help me deepen my faith by helping me see deeper inside myself and what the work is supposed to be doing in the form of transformation.
Right. Well said. Well said. And, well, yeah, but that's all I got. Yeah, that's all I got. Yeah.
And I would just tell people, like, I remember jokingly saying to somebody, you can read the Torah and you can read the Bible, but when you're ready to really be afraid, read the Quran. Because it ain't no, yo, it's no cutting corners. That John is, man, yo, I'm telling you, some of them swords, you be sitting there like this. You know, and I don't know, is if for, and you know, for people like us who see when we read, who see, whoo, is all I got to say. You know, I remember one of the hadiths that got me so good was they was talking about the hellfire and how hot the hellfire is, right? And they said the hellfire was so hot, right, that a pebble under your heel would boil your brains. What did you say to me?
Yeah, that's wild.
but then they turn around and they give you the flip side, and they talk about Al-Firdaus, the Jannah, right? And they talk about these ladies with see-through legs and black eyes like pearls, and seats of brocade, and robes of green, and water that flow underneath, and fruits that you never seen or heard before. So it's just like, you know, for all my fantasy folks, you got a lot to read there, you know. And for the people who study on a deeper level, like the history, you know, I tell people the pre-Islamic period, the period what they call Jahiliyyah, before the Quran was revealed. We have to remember the Kaaba and all that was already there. The Kaaba was there from, as they say, from the beginning of time. You know, people don't even I think know the story of the Kaaba. Some people only associate the Kaaba with Islam, but it's more to the story of the Kaaba. You know, it's more to the story of the angels. Is until you read the Quran, you don't learn about the creation of the jinn. And you know, it's just so much that I can't see how anyone wouldn't be fascinated and horrified at learning all of this stuff, because I know I am always. I'm always fascinated and horrified at the same time. Just keep me on the edge of my seat. I don't know. You know. Yeah. It's an undertaking for sure.
It's sad, yeah.
And you know, and for every Muslim, you're supposed to read the Quran every year. Once every year during the month of Ramadan, the Quran is broken into 30 parts, and you're supposed to read a part every day. Yeah. So you know, I tell you, it's a lot. But you know, when you read the stories about Jesus and Moses and Lot and all these things in the Quran, they're very different sometimes than what you read in the other books. And it's nice to be able to be open enough to go and cross-reference things, ask questions about things. You know, there's characters mentioned in the Quran that I can remember saying, who is this? I never heard of this character before. I never heard of this person before. You know, is this person mentioned anywhere else in the Bible, in the Torah? You know, and you'll find that they are many times, you know, mentioned in other places. You know, the name, for example, you know, in the Bible is Jesus, in the Quran is Isa alayhi salam. You know, but I mean, who would think Isa is the same as Jesus? And you know, like, so you know, when they tell that story, you're looking at it a little bit different, you know, and his mother Mary instead of Mary is Miriam, you know, and things like that. So I mean, little subtle difference. If you really are a researcher in the way of not just research for scholarly reasons, but for spiritual ones, this is a good place to be. You know, it's a good place to be, like to be so open and to be exposed to so much. And we have every book that, I mean, just access to it. But you did say when you were looking up this book, you saw that it was not in publication anymore anywhere.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, yeah,
not,
very hard to find. You know, I didn't do a deep search of it, but just when I was creating the thumbnail and I was looking for a picture of the cover, uh, everything that popped up, it said out of stock, out of stock. And you know, maybe there might be a PDF or electronic version out there, but yeah, I did not see that book available anywhere in my brief search for the picture of the book cover.
all right, so I guess I could start the bidding at about $1,000 then. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
start the bid. All right, I don't even remember how much I paid for this. Cause see, unlike over here, they don't always put the prices on these books. I'm looking on the back now. Nope, I don't even remember how much I paid for this book. But I remember I got it when it came first off the presses, because at the masjid, everybody was clamoring. Like, ooh, this new book is coming out and it's going to help us argue more.
Help us argue more is crazy.
But that's how it felt. That's how it felt. You know, that may not have been everybody's intention, but there was a lot of conversations after this book came out, and people realized that they just, I don't know, they weren't aware of some of these things that you know. And I thought the funny thing is that you could be a thing without knowing you a thing. You could be a part of one of these sects without knowing it, just by something you believe.
Wow.
You know, so yeah, great book. Inheritors of the Prophets. And you know, and if I was to suggest the book before this one, the other one that I was gonna bring was it's a book of all the stories of all the prophets. That would be a great place to start, because then you would know the prophets themselves, and then the you know what they're following along with. Or if, like I said, the Arakik Amaktum, the sealed nectar, that would be the other book I would read. The story of the prophet himself. Great book, fantastic and amazing book.